All right, now that you have Altium installed and you're connected to the license server, we need to get started on our project and how to start a project. So Altium will always come back as you power it up, start it up again, it's going to start up where you left off. So in this case, you can see there's several projects and schematics and stuff lined up here. We don't need any of that right now. I can open this up, you can see there's schematics. So I'm going to close these documents. We're going to come up here to File, and right away you see there's a section that says New, File New. I'm not opening an old file or an old project. I'm going to start a new project. So I'm going to say New Project, and it's going to say, well, what do I want to do in a new project, right? I'm going to make a new project. It's a PCB project. It's going to ask me, what's the name of this project? So I'm going to name the project OpAmp. I'll just copy that so I can paste it later. And I'm going to save it in a folder. And where am I going to save it? Let's see, if I go to my temp folder here and make a new one, and I'll call it OpAmp. So now I have my project in this folder. Project name OpAmp folder, C drive, temp. Well, I didn't get that right. Let's fix it. There we go. OpAmp. Whoop, had a mistake on that one, right? That happens. So I'm going to save it there and tell it create. And now I have a project here, just like I had all these projects. See the little triangle looking thing there? I can click on that and collapse that tree of parts, right? I can do that with any of these. I can open it up and collapse it. So in this case, you'll see I have an OpAmp project and nothing in it. Now, Altium operates like a relational database. So as you open up and make a new project, that would be your top layer. Below the top layer of project, I could have schematics, PCBs, libraries. So let's go to our OpAmp. I'm going to right click and say add new to project. I'm going to add a new schematic. And there it is. It says sheet 2. And then I'm going to right click on it again and say add new to project, PCB or printed circuit board. Okay, now I have PCB1 and I have sheet 2. That's okay, but it's not really the best way to save it, because if I have sheet 1 and PCB1 and everybody else in the class never changes their names, everything will be sheet 1 and PCB1. So when I come up here to the top and tell it save all documents, it's going to ask me, how do you want to save this? I'm going to call it OpAmp. And then it's going to ask me again, how do you want to save the schematic? I'm going to name it OpAmp. So after I've done that, now I can look and see that I have everything saved. I have an OpAmp schematic document and an OpAmp PCB document. We're going to start with a schematic. If you look at your project options, we can see that there's a lot of settings here. There's a thing called class generation. We're going to use that when we deal with the PCB. I'm going to turn this on for now so I won't forget later. This won't be important for you because later we're going to turn it off, but I want to show you what it is to start with. So when I want to start a schematic, I have a circuit in mind. I need to be able to place components on my PCB, I'm sorry, on my schematic. So to place components, I'll have libraries open. Now, I have a tab over here that says component, but if that tab isn't there, you can find it. I can hit view. Let's see, view and toolbars. Right, and here's the utilities and wiring, right? I can turn it on there. Panels is probably the best place. It'll say differences and components and all these projects. I have all these possible things, the schematic filters. The fastest, easiest way is down here on the bottom right. It says panels. I can click on it and say I want to be able to see components. And there they are, just in case it was gone. Here, I'll just delete it. Now I don't have a tab here that says components. I go to panels. I find the components, click on it, and it comes on. Now the components tab moves out of the way when you're not using it. You can see how I can click on the tab. If I come over and click in the schematic, it moves out of the way. I can also move it. I can grab this tab and drag it over here. Stick it over, now it's over here, components. Click on it, there it is. So you can move the tab around whichever side is better for you. Don't worry about left or right. You can move it wherever works best for you. Now inside my components, you'll have libraries, and I can open this up. I generally, I have a lot of libraries open because I've been doing a lot of work here, but a really common one that I use a lot is this miscellaneous devices. I use that one a lot. So we're going to do an op-amp project here, so let me get started. I'm going to slide this down. You see that these are all in alphabetical order, right? I can switch the order. I'm going to drag this down. Here we go. There's one that says op-amp. Now, when I click on that, it highlights it. If I double click on it, it attaches the op-amp to my mouse. And I can move this around anywhere I want. I can zoom in if I hold the control key down and roll my scroll wheel on my mouse. I can zoom in and hold the control key and roll the other way, zoom out. If I want to rotate the part, I hit my space bar. As long as it's attached to my mouse, I can rotate it. If for some reason I wanted to reverse it, like mirror it, if I hit the X key, it mirrors. Hit the X key again, it mirrors back. So that's a little bit about how to move things around and how to orient it. You always want to try to make your schematic as readable as possible. In order to do that, sometimes you want to rotate things and shift things, and so it's easy to wire it up. Now to place the part, all I have to do is left click my mouse, and I've placed the part. You see it's automatically put another part on my mouse. If I don't want to place any more parts, I can either right click or hit the escape key. There we go. I have an op-amp with all the pins on it. So we're going to make a very simple circuit so we can see how to wire things. I'm going to go back to components, and I'll get a resistor. Here's a resistor. I'll double click on that, and I'm going to stick a resistor here, and I'll put a feedback resistor up here. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to place a different resistor, just so we have a little more variety here. And I'll place this guy over here. Now, one thing to look at when I've placed this, you'll see that they're all labeled R question mark, and they're all set up automatically as 1K. You can go and edit any of those features. I might want 1K, and maybe this guy, I can just click on it there, put a 0 in there, hit enter, it's 10K. I could highlight the resistor. Like I could highlight this one, hit my properties tab, and again, if the properties isn't there, come down to panels and say I want to see properties. Click on it, and I can change the values there. Here it says 10K. Maybe I want it to be 50 ohms. So I say 50. Come over here. Now it says 50. So many ways to skin a cat, right? So I have a 1K, 10K, and 50 ohms. Now I could also come here and say I want this one to be R1. So I click on it, I get inside there and say R1, and I would go through and do all my resistors. Most integrated circuits don't start with AR, they start with U, so I'm just going to modify that. But there's an easier way. I can come up here to Tools and Annotation and tell it I want to annotate my schematic. There's a couple of ways to do this. The more complicated way, but it gives you a lot more options. I just click Annotate Schematics, and then it says, what order do I want to go in? Start at the top and move around like this and keep moving down. You'll see all these different ways. Start at the bottom, move up. So you can tell it how you want it to start. I can give it a start index. Do I want to start at 1? Do I want to start at 10? The first device is 10. I got options. So you can adjust that however it fits your project. You can go through all these things. After that, you can say update change list, and it'll say 3 changes were made. And then you can say accept the changes, and it'll accept them. Then you can say execute. You see a lot of steps here, and then close, and then close. And now I have R1, R2, and R3. A lot of steps. I just did an undo, so now I have R1, R question mark, R question mark. The faster way, if you don't need to do all those extra steps, would say annotate, and I come down here and say annotate schematics quietly. So I click on that guy. He says there's 3 things that need an update. By the way, it will use the parameters that I set up in that first one. Those don't go away. I say, yep, I just want to update. Boom. Now look, R1, R2, R3, and U1. I didn't have to go through all those extra little steps. So I like to use that. I'll save it, because you never know when Bill Gates is lurking around back there in the back side of Windows trying to get your machine to die and you lose all your work. So I save often. Now when I want to wire this up, it's going to be kind of similar to how you did it with PSpice. If I zoom in, you'll see that there's a little X at the end of each one of these parts. That's where the net gets connected. So I have my wiring tools here. I can come up here, place wire, and you'll see that when I place the wire, my X turns red. See, my X is gray, red. That means I'm on a node. If I come over here, not red, no node. So I come over here, I click, I wire across, I click again, I have a wire. I can come up to this resistor, click, I can come down here. I don't have to wire to that node. I can wire to a wire. You can always wire to a node or a wire. So I click there. There's my junction. Looks good. I can come over here, wire that one across. And I can come up here and say, hey, that looks good. Now I look at this, and it's like, yeah, schematic looks right, but there's a problem. Even that little red squiggly line is telling me there's a problem. The problem is this is not connected to a net. Right? That net connected right there where that little plus symbol was, the little crosshatch. So I can fix it. I could grab this wire and move it out of the way, or I can grab the whole wire and drag it over. So now I drag that wire over to the junction point, and at the junction point I have a node connection. That's one very important thing, and you have to keep track of this when you build your schematics and your projects. Make sure that you're connected to the nodes and connected to wires. It's very simple to make a mistake that visually looks okay. All right, that's probably enough for this first video. Practice that a little bit, try it, draw it up in your own Altium software and make your own projects and see how it looks. We're going to move on after this and continue with our little op-amp circuit.